Have you ever wondered why that one group you've always liked doesn't hit the same anymore? As if they were a completely different group from the one you knew? Well, the reason could be a lot of things. Sometimes the music just isn't that good anymore, or it's far different from what they've already done. Sometimes it could be one's change of tastes, or maybe they've just outgrown it. There are a lot of factors to consider in this situation, but one I don't hear mentioned as much would be a group's identity. If anything, identity should be the main focus for any of them to stay relevant in this rapidly moving industry. You could be today's talk of the town, but there's no saying if tomorrow would be the same. And lately I've been seeing more groups begin to fall off one by one. Groups that have huge potential going to waste for visible reasons. And for today's video, I've decided to look at some groups who have weak identities versus groups with good ones. I'll be presenting differences the two have, all through my own observation of course. And at the end hopefully find an answer to why this works, and why this doesn't. I'm going to be comparing groups from these two major companies. And spoiler alert, I will be on SM's side for this video. Like I said, I wanted to compare a group with a strong identity versus a group with a weak one. And through all my years of K-pop I always saw SM to have the best in this department. And for JYP, while not all of them, I do see some cracks in the system that I'd like to point out, which could very well be the reason why people have problems with their groups. Fuck all companies for sure, but for this video I'd love you all to listen first because I really feel like this should be talked about more. First of all, what does identity even mean? I've attended about 5 self-development classes, so I think I have a pretty solid understanding of this matter. Identity is the person you present yourself as, plus the perception of you, made by other people. Basically, who you are personally and as a part of society. Each one of us may have similar beliefs and appearances, but in our core none of us can be the same. Identity doesn't just come to us, but it builds up over time through our individual experiences. Before this turns into a full-blown philosophy session, I'll assume you got the gist of it. For K-pop groups it's pretty much the same, at least for the most part. They obviously debut with a song and concept trying to affect as much as they can, and over time they change and adapt to something both the group and fans can settle with. But of course, that isn't always the case. When K-pop stans hear identity they assume it's something like the group's concept, which of course is understandable. Concepts determine how the group's music and visuals will be for a certain comeback or era. How they present themselves and how we perceive it, that's pretty much their identity, right? Well, it's not that simple. As we all know, K-pop groups tackle lots of concepts through their careers, so saying that's their identity is saying groups have multiple identities. TWICE would be a great example for a group who has tried many styles, but isn't considered to be their main strength. When you think of the early days of this group I just know each one of us would immediately think of cute, bubbly, and fun. For a good 11 releases, even disregarding the Japanese ones, TWICE did exactly that. It was only then in 2019 when TWICE released Feel Special that we saw a new side of them. And from that point forward they started releasing some of the same and some that are new, and to be honest they've done well maintaining themselves. But after following them for a lengthy time, I did notice some things. People haven't been ecstatic for TWICE's new music for a while now. Sure, that could just be haters hating, or maybe they've simply passed their time. But that happens to most K-pop groups, so while that could be the case, I think there's more to it. My hypothesis would be TWICE has outgrown their audience, and vice versa. Let's look at our timeline one more time. Groups usually establish themselves with their first 3 to 5 comebacks, and will essentially be the group's image for the next few years or so. And only after that will they start branching out to other sounds and whatnot. Now the problem with TWICE, they did the cutesy stuff for their first 10 comebacks, freaking 18 if you included the Japanese ones. And through all of those 18 releases JYP built the foundation for both the group and their fans. They were already one of the biggest groups in the industry and they weren't even 5 years old. JYP's biggest decision was either to capitalize on it or let the group grow to something more. And of course money prevails, so the decision was to make more of what the people love. Of course that was the ideal thing to do, but there would eventually be consequences. The audience was basically split now. Here resides the people who have always thought of TWICE as the group that makes cute songs, and over here are the people who want to see the group do something else. For a long time this group was winning, but eventually TWICE did venture into something new. For a time I'd say both sides were satisfied, but that didn't last long because people started asking, what else is next? Apart from bouncing from light and mature concepts, what else does the group offer? And right now seeing their state, it looks like JYP has given up on them. Yes, good music, yes, good concepts, but compared to what's happening around, all these groups have much more engaging projects. It is no wonder why Twice isn't the main talk nowadays. You could argue that Twice doesn't need to try anymore cause they've already peaked, and I would say that shouldn't be an excuse. Now here's a group who debuted a year earlier, but has always known what kind of group they'll be in the future. Unlike Twice and multiple other groups in the industry, Red Velvet was made known by their own uniqueness that only Red Velvet can do. It is because of groups like them that K-pop groups, especially the newer ones, try to replicate their natural variety, yet ultimately fail doing so. Of course I'm talking about Red Velvet's diversity. And no, not musically, but conceptually. Generally all K-pop groups are capable of serving entire platters of genres. The only thing making them any different is the fact they were a group made exactly to do that. I mean it's literally in their name. Red Velvet. If you didn't already know, Red Velvet is a name that represents the duality of the group. Red, being the showcase of their brighter and more confident image. Releases like these are examples I consider to be phenomenal. Not only do they show a poppier image with this side, but in my opinion it is the true side where they can go all out with their imagination. A song like Zimzalabim sounds like a crime against humanity, but I assure you that every single second of that song was made with the goal to break the limitations of K-pop and music in general. It may not be the fan favorite side, but it is the side that makes this group fully unique to their own, and like mentioned, pushes the group above anything else that has been already done. Now to the Velvet side, which is a lot of people's favorite, and rightfully so. Contrary to popular belief, the Velvet side isn't just a darker version of the group. From my own observation, the Velvet side should be commonly known as their musical side. The Red is great at breaking expectations, but that doesn't always reflect the audience reaction. This is why we have this Velvet side, which is in my opinion the group's love letter to the art of music. Instead of trying to subvert expectations, they simply respect music as an art form. Getting inspirations from many genres of music like jazz, R&B, ballad, which are some of the earliest genres for popular music. It's a side where they can get sentimental with their themes and messages. Something deeper in thought other than the fun side the Red offers. Yet of course, both sides are great on their own, and above all both of them work under one group. I don't know how far planned did SM prepare for this group, but they've done a great job maintaining their core identity. Even if Red Velvet didn't become K-pop's most successful group ever, despite having only given us quality hits, they knew their stand and position from the get-go and never shied away from it. It's quite awkward to compare these two because they are still both really successful in their own ways. Twice may not be a group with a set vision, but they are still selling out stadiums regardless. Luckily for them, their quote-unquote downfall came pretty late when they've already cemented themselves as one of K-pop's best. So let's look at a comparison that seems a little more cruel. I know hating on ITZY is like everyone's hobby these days, and I personally wouldn't bother adding more to that if the hate began from nothing. But it didn't. The hate may be too much, but the criticisms are all valid in my opinion. One of this generation's largest groups doesn't just fall off out of nowhere, and obviously the music played a big part in it. But let's look at the other elephant in the room, the producers. Apart from the members of these groups, the producers are the most important people in this industry. But for all the good they've done, they are also the reason some of these releases can be so fucking terrible. ITZY hasn't been the same ever since their monstrous 2022 run. Actually, let's take it back to the very beginning, back to 2019. The third generation was at its peak. Newer groups started coming, JYP drowning in money, and they got 5 of the hottest rookies under their belt. Of course the great decision was to debut them, and oh boy was it a statement. Debuted with one of K-pop's most iconic songs and performed it in a way no other group has ever performed for a debut. Which was then followed by a song that many didn't like at the time, but what did remain was their burning craze for performance. And then came their magnum opus, one of the best K-pop songs out right now, and ultimately cemented ITZY as a group to look out for. After that self-love trilogy, came the era of ITZY where they started trying new styles. Not everyone loved it, but for the most part it was okay for a lot, and above all you could still tell that ITZY was the same group we knew. Then they continued with their agenda of diversifying their concepts, and for all things considered it wasn't a bad attempt. But it is the time we started to feel a little crack in their system, that got bigger over time. And eventually, we arrived at a point where we could all see it. Whenever I and probably most fans say we miss the old ITZY, we don't mean they were better back then. But of course as a group that just debuted we didn't expect them to be at their best already. We believed the group would naturally improve in all aspects as time went by, which is why it is so disappointing to see how far down they've fallen. I don't know about you, but when I see those girls I see confidence, and lately I haven't been feeling any of that. You could argue that the meaning of the songs have remained fairly similar, but what about the music itself? How the song sounds? Say whatever you want, but of the 10 times I've listened to Sneakers, I have never felt the theme of self-love and rebellion. Nor when I listen to Cake. I don't get encouraged to express myself freely and with ease. Of course I've heard goofy sounding songs with deeper meanings. That's pretty much most K-pop songs anyways. But here's the thing. The attempt just wasn't good. ITZY was introduced to us as this fresh group with a loud voice, singing about confidence and being rebellious young people, all while integrating it with different sounds. The group's identity has been established and the public acknowledges that. It was going well for both parties, so I just really do not understand why their producers felt the need to do any of this. To put it simply, ITZY wasn't the right group for experiments. Their producers knew how to create but they didn't know how to maintain, so they just started experimenting with them, and it just didn't work. Eventually they ran out of ideas, and now they're just giving ITZY anything they can. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that's honestly not a good sign. aepa's producers are the complete opposite. Where ITZY lacked vision and good producers, aespa excelled. Right at the beginning of their career they've heavily established what kind of group aespa will be moving forward. It is known that this group will rely heavily on a futuristic concept, which wasn't really that new and creative, but in hindsight it was probably the best iteration of the concept so far. Yes, this future concept, but make it actually look cool. The best part about it is that SM reflects the concept not through just the visual, but even through their own music. EDM, synth pop, and all these genres are probably the most genius ways to translate the group's identity through an audio format. For a group like aespa, the music better be banging literally. Songs like these sound nothing alike. You wouldn't even assume they were from the same group. But if you were to put these songs together masterfully, with an overarching storyline passing through multiple albums, with lore that is told like a spectacle, you best believe the group you have is a special one. Looking at these photos alone you'd probably think it's from aespa. Their producers knew what to do with the group, what kind of aesthetic they'll have, the music they'll sing, the videos they'll be producing. aespa was never meant to be just another K-pop group, and that is why they've remained so relevant and is still growing exponentially. Truly one of the groups to remember in K-pop. ITZY will of course still be remembered by many, but a good amount of it will be for their tragic downfall. ITZY is still pretty young, and has all the chances to bounce back up and regain the people's trust. That being said, it shouldn't be anything short of amazing. They've left a poor taste in many people's mouth, and it would take 10 bottles of mouthwash to get that shit out. But knowing their company's history, that might be a difficult task to do. I know from all the things I've said it seems like TWICE and ITZY are failures, but I don't think so. TWICE is still currently one of the biggest groups out right now and ever, while ITZY still got all the chances in the world to shine bright as they once had. But here's a group that I really thought JYP has failed every single time, and it was honestly very sad to see. I won't even pretend to know about GOT7's full history, but I have seen them slowly fade away from the industry, so let's talk about it. When I say the big three groups of the third generation, you'd probably think of these groups right here. All still relevant, all still strong, and are all still here. But there was a time when GOT7 was a part of this ensemble of groups. I'd say 2014 to 2016 was when boy groups were really running the market. Hit after hit after hit. These boys didn't back down no matter what. And for GOT7, they released some of my favorite songs ever from boy groups. These songs right here have a special place in my heart. They defined the era they were released in and honestly will be a part of K-pop history forever. The only thing is, I can't say the same for the group who sang it. It's not that they just started releasing bad music or anything. They've actually released some bangers even after the fact. The real problem was JYP, who never capitalized on the huge popularity GOT7 already had. Compare that to other big groups of their time. GOT7 is behind in the market, when they could have easily been as big or maybe even bigger than their peers. Their music got stale, almost out of date, their promotions was lackluster, and it was obvious JYP was pushing their junior groups a lot more than them. It's not that the group wasn't doing well, the company just stopped caring for them overall. So as their traction diminished, they ended up having only one comeback per year, and eventually the market lost interest. Fans outside the fandom didn't care much anymore, and just like that they were out of the radar. And when they could have disbanded, they didn't. Everyone but the company knew the group was much more capable than what was expected of them. They did their best as for the most part they were a self-producing group. But if your own label doesn't even pretend to care about you, then what's the point? In the end they decided to leave that stinky ass company and did their own thing with full liberty. And while that is good for them, I fear the damage has already been done. When compared to their peers at the time, it's clear who is still going strong as a group. GOT7 has accumulated lots of loyal fans throughout the years, has sold lots and made hits here and there, so calling them a failure wouldn't be fair. But then again, the group's current state is nothing compared to what they could have been. EXO is a group who debuted way before the other did, but due to consistency they remained relevant in the industry. Just like with ITZY and aespa, EXO's music and overall style was always executed perfectly. Some definitely better than the others, but if we look all throughout their whole discography, it is just pure golden. Timeless classics, god-tier music, literal iconicism in musical form. And it's not like they stuck to one concept the whole time. Each comeback was different from the last and it was always a surprise. You never knew what you'll get next, but history tells us that whatever it is, you know it was going to be a good one. And I don't think you understand how difficult that is to do. Being consistent with your work earns the trust of any listener. Because consistency shows us that the people working behind know what they are doing, and to me that is the number one thing groups should strive for. Creeping.
Hey, you wanna come in?
Look, I may sound like a hater to y'all, but I do believe everything I've said is valid. JYP was a beast in the industry for a very long time, but things may no longer be working in the same manner. The times are changing and so are people's interests. What was good in the past may not be good now, which may be their greatest obstacle right now. And it's not like JYP is incapable of producing groups with a clear identity. Stray Kids may not be everyone's cup of tea, but their style is noticeable. Whether you like them or not, people know who the boys are and the content they produce, which I just can't say the same for their other groups. It's not even just a JYP thing. In fact, plenty of K-pop acts lack distinctiveness. You ever ponder why so many people support the same bands? Why do the same artists make the most noise? Their strong identity is simply why. I usually notice fans questioning why some groups are favored over others. Well, let me ask you this. Why would fans favor a group that struggles to maintain a consistent style? Or one that no longer feels the same? Or one whose own label doesn't even care about? Why would fans settle for less overall, when they could obtain more? However, it is possible that these groups and companies aren't striving for greatness. Perhaps we're just here to have some enjoyment, or perhaps we're here to make some money. Without a doubt, this may be the case for some, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you and I both know the K-pop industry can also be much more than that. I'm not talking about just idols. I mean this for everybody working behind the screen. Each one of these people are creators, storytellers, musicians. In the end they are all artists of their own. K-pop allows these wonderful minds to interweave with each other, and create something that could change lives forever. Nonetheless, there's objectively nothing wrong with being basic. Just don't expect to receive any more than what is given. Because when we see an artist trying their best, pouring all their blood, sweat and tears into their craft, creating something unimaginable, giving us an experience like no other, we fans will be more likely to support them.
Hey, you wanna come in?